Are you sign time Earth left?
The Lament Configuration. One of my favorite little toys. I have many friends in here. Well, a certain person named Frank thought it'd be a good idea to open up the lament. I wonder what he found inside, or who found him. In darkness, a blood-curdling cacophony. The squeal of unoiled winches, the rasp of hooks and razors being sharpened, and worse, the howl of tormented souls. Above this din, one particular victim yells for mercy, a mixture of tears and roars of rage. By degrees, his incoherent pleas are drowned out by the surrounding tumult, until, without warning, his voice pierces the confusion afresh, this time reduced to naked scream. And with the sound, an image, a house, number 55, Lodovico Street, an old 3-story late Victorian house, with gaunt trees lining its overgrown garden. Its curtains are drawn. There is newspaper over its top window. The titles begin to run as we approach the house down the driveway. We move inside to the hallway, the cries louder now. Room by room we explore the empty house while the titles continue to run. It has been left empty for many years, though much of its furniture remains covered in dust sheets. On the mantelpiece of one room, a plaster saint. In the kitchen, evidence of life here. Open tins, bread, bottles of spirits, a glass. We move upstairs, gliding along the corridor of the lower landing. The din is furious now. On the floor of one room, a makeshift bed, blankets strewn, an open suitcase, more liquor. We move up a flight and approach a room off the upper landing, the door of which is ajar. The light within swings backwards and forwards, spilling into the passageway. As we reach the door, the screams from within halt abruptly. We can hear a bell now, which has been pealing steadily throughout this opening scene. As we move through the door, the titles end. The bar bulbs in the room we've entered swing violently, disorienting us. There are chains, dozens of them, disappearing with the darkness of the ceiling. All are swinging back and forth, some end in hooks, with pieces of skin and sinew adhering. Some are serrated, others simply drip blood. The bell tolls on. On the blood-spattered floor, a box, some 6 inches square, which resembles an elaborate Chinese puzzle box. Later, we'll learn its name and function. It's called the Lament Configuration, and it's a way to raise hell, literally. For now, it remains an enigma. A hand, its flesh systematically pierced with needles, reaches down and picks the box up. In close up, we see just what an elaborate construction it is. Made up of sliding panels and mysterious chambers, it is open at present, its polished innards exposed. Out of it, a banal melody played on a hidden mechanism. The hands, which belong to one of the demons, a Cenobite, move over the box. It's over. Delicately, the hands begin to reconstruct the box, sliding the well-oiled parts back into place. the tunes simplifying with each maneuver. The room is getting darker, the chains are disappearing into the gloom. We see tantalizing glimpses of other figures, turning from the light and fading into the darkness. We catch sights of monstrous faces, but only for the briefest of moments. Then they're gone. The box is almost returned to its unopened condition. The last sounds to fade are the tune from the box and the bell. It tolls on as the final panel of the box is slid into place. The light stops swinging, the panel clicks, the tune stops. At last, a long shot of the room. At the far end, the window is covered with yellowed newspapers. There is dust settling through the air. Otherwise, it is empty. The bell fades. It's as if nothing ever happened here, except somewhere very quietly, a creaking that could be the sound of floorboards or the low, agonized gasp of a thing barely alive. The wind is blaring as we watch the door of number 55. From the door step voices. One is that of Larry Cotton. The other is his wife Julia. Clearly, Larry is attempting to get inside. We hear the sound of keys tried in the lock. It's one of these. We're going to freeze to death. Okay. The sound of another key tried in the lock. Maybe somebody's changed the lock. Slightly irritated. Like who? Just a thought. Ah, the key is turned. Success. The door swings open. Voila. We see the pair on the doorstep. Larry is an American in his early 40s, an attractive man who has lost his edge in recent years. He looks harassed. He smirks too much. A little, but significant, corner of him is utterly defeated. Julia, his wife, is English and looks perhaps 10 years his junior. She is beautiful, but her face betrays a barely buried unhappiness. Life has disappointed her too, of late, and Larry has been a major part of their disappointment. Well, this is it. They step over the threshold. The door of the torture room creaks. As the wind blows, it opens an inch. From downstairs, we hear Julia's voice. It smells damp. It's just been empty a while. Larry slams the front door. The torture room door creaks closed again. From below. Besides, it's an old house. He stands in the hallway, not certain which way to go from here. How long since you were here? The best part of 10 years. Larry picks up some mail, curious circulars mostly, from behind the door, then leads Julia through from the hallway to explore the ground floor. I wanted to sell it off after one point, after the old lady died, but I couldn't get Frank to agree. He opens one of the doors and looks inside. It's not been touched. He continues along the passageway. He opens another door and steps into a large room. He opens one of the curtains. Light pours in, dust-laden shafts falling on the sheeted furniture. Look at this. Julia lingers in the doorway. Why didn't he want to sell it? Dismissively, I don't know. Probably wanted a hideaway. He pulls a sheet off a chair. Look at this stuff. The chair is ugly, old-fashioned. Julia is unimpressed. Not exactly modern. Larry shrugs. We'll sell it. Sell everything. I thought half of it was your brother's. He won't complain. He can barely off some of his creditors. Larry is getting more enthusiastic about the place by the moment. He leaves the room, moving past Julia to explore further. You know, we have to let Christy see this place before we do anything to it. She'll love it. You mean we're moving in? Larry pauses, looks at her. You don't like it? Julia shrugs. It's better than Brooklyn. She turns back down the hallway. He watches her, then follows. You're still blaming me. No, I'm not. You wanted to come back to London. We came back. We are hearing the tip of a debate they've had dozens of times, which immediately annoys them both. All right. So what's the argument? Julia looks cold. No argument. Oh, goodness, Julia. Julia wanders back to the bottom of the stairs, then starts to climb. Exasperated to himself, Julia climbs the stairs, her face charged with suppressed feelings. She's sick of Larry. His enthusiasm depresses her. His compromises anger her. What's between them is stale, like this house. The door opens a fraction to the torture room. Larry has stepped into the kitchen to find the remains of the food we briefly glimpsed in the title sequence, now rotted and fungal. It smells. To judge the expression on his face, it also puzzles him. Then, from above, Larry! He leaves the kitchen and retraces his steps to the bottom of the stairs. Larry! I hear you. He starts up the stairs. Larry reaches the top of the stairs. Where are you? In here. Larry follows Julia's voice to the end of the corridor. Julia is standing in a doorway beyond the bedroom we saw in the title sequence, untouched since then. Squatters? Larry steps past her and throws back the blankets. Wood lights scurry away. He goes to the suitcase and starts looking through it. Besides clothes, there's a lot else that speaks of his owner. Bric-a-brac, picked up in a lifetime of adventuring, handful of bullets, fragments of erotic statue, coins and notes from a dozen countries. Amongst the stuff, some photographs. Larry peers at them. One picture, a good-looking, intense man in his mid to late 30s, in bed with a naked Chinese girl. Frank. At the door, we see Julia almost flinch at the name. He's here. He's been here. There's stuff in the kitchen. He must have made a hasty exit. The phone rings downstairs. Julia jumps. That'll be Christy. Larry stands up and leaves the room, moving past Julia in the doorway, who is left to stare down at the bed Frank has slept in, and the suitcase of belongings as we hear Larry clatter downstairs. It seems Julia's face is close to tears. The phone continues to ring. Larry steps through and picks up the receiver. Hello? There's no answer. Hello? Julia goes to the open suitcase and looks at the photographs. Downstairs, on the phone, is there anybody here? He puts down the phone. He goes back out into the hall. Nervous that Larry will return and see what she's doing, Julia is going through the photographs. There's nobody there. The sound of his foot on the stairs. Hurriedly, she selects a photograph of Frank without the girl and pockets it. Larry is climbing the stairs. I'm surprised it's even connected. The phone rings again. S. Mission accomplished. Julia leaves the bedroom, taking one last glance at the sweat-stained sheet and the indent pillar where Frank lay. A lone wood louse crawls over the sheet, navigating the folds. She closes the door on the sight. Downstairs, the phone stops ringing. Larry has picked up the phone. Who's there? It's Christy, barely audible. Daddy? Christy's the daughter of Larry's first marriage and his only child on the phone. She is barely 20, beautiful in an unpretentious way. A dream of a girl next door. We can't see much of the room she's in at the moment. The shot is too tight. Christy? I got through. Where are you? I found the room. Larry's still on the phone. What did you say? I said I found a room. We begin to draw back from Christy now as she continues to speak to her father. She's sitting on a battered chair by the door. The room she's in is cramped and dirty. From outside, the sound of trains going by. I thought you were going to stay with us for a while. Pained. No, Dad. You like the house. You like my room. Do you want me to come over? Hastily, Christy says, No, not just yet. It needs, some work. That it does. The place now that we can see it has a good view of it. It's a total dump. Well, I want to see the house. Well, I want you to see the house. I'm not going to change my mind, Dad. As she speaks, she reaches forward to pull a picture tacked to the wall of an orangutan with breasts collaged onto it down. She succeeds. Beneath there's a large hole in the wall, which the picture was there to conceal. Plaster falls from it. Great. Christy mouths the words. Well, come over, will you? See the place. Maybe tomorrow. I got to go look for a job. Okay, honey. Well, you take care. I love you. I love you too. She puts the receiver down. As she does, so the small table on which the phone is sitting collapses. She covers her face with her hand. Julia is 3 steps from the bottom of the stairs. Well, why not? We'll move in Sunday. He smiles, pleased. A church bell rings off screen. We hear voices. 2 men are attempting to move a bed into the house. With Larry masterminding the maneuvers, we hear their efforts, but we don't yet see them. Our interest is in Julia, who was unpacking a tea chest in a room which is still full of draped furniture. We're not going to get it in. Tip it. Wait, watch the effing paint work. Look, do you want the bed in or not? Just take it slowly. Oh, sod you. Chas, slow it down like the man says. It'll go in. Famous last effing words. Julia's face through this has been almost devoid of expression. She's holding so many feelings inside, deep inside. Now she moves from one box to another and opens it to find it full of bathroom bric-a-brac. She picks it up and goes through it into the hallway. The bell continues to ring. The 3 sweating men have the bed wedged in the door. All right, let's give it another try. Do you really need this bed, lady? Larry turns, sees Julia. How are you doing through there? It looks like a bomb's dropped. Got any beer? There's some in the fridge. Nobody moves to get it. Certainly Julia has no intentions of being waitress. She goes to the bottom of the stairs. I'll get it. Larry disappears through into the kitchen. Julia starts up the stairs, watched appreciatively by the 2 men in the doorway. One leans over and whispers to the other, who laughs. Julia glances back at them. The whisperer licks his lips, the meaning of the gesture perfectly apparent. Julia heads upstairs. Christy arrives at the head of the drive. The 2 men are drinking beers. The bed has not been moved. She wanders down the drive towards the house. It's my lucky day. Hi. Want to buy a bed? Not much. She moves past them, attempting to insinuate herself between the bed and the door jamb. They watch, enjoying her efforts. Dad? Larry emerges from one of the rooms, looking harassed. His face lightens as he sees his daughter. Honey! They hug each other. Big house. You like? Me like. Another hug. I'll show you around when we've got this darn bed moved. Is Julia here? Upstairs. Treat her gently, hon. She hates moving. What a surprise. Christy. Okay, I'll be nice. You get on with the muscle work. I'll make myself some coffee. Kitchen's through on your left. Christy kisses Larry and goes through to the kitchen. Larry turns back to the door. The men have been watching Christy. Larry clearly dislikes the scrutiny. First man, outstared by Larry, looks away. The second man is unperturbed. That your daughter? Uh-huh. He grins oafishly. Got her mother's looks. Her mother's dead. The second man's grin fades. Oh, Julia's my second wife. Lucky man. Darn right. Now, are we going to move the bed or not? The kitchen is chaotic. Cutlery, crockery, utensils, pans, and foodstuffs have been heaped on every available surface. Christy has found the kettle, but is having difficulty turning on the tap. She struggles with it. No joy, just a rattling sound in the pipes as the system lurches into action. The pipes rattle and chug behind the plaster. The camera moves along the corridor, hugging the wall. At the end of the corridor stands Julia. In a patch of sunlight, she has the photograph of Frank in her hands. She looks intently at it. A close-up of the photograph, then Frank's voice. This is now, we are seeing Frank and we're looking at the past. Can I come in? A front door opens in Julia's flashback. On the step of another house stands Frank with 2 suitcases. It's raining outside, hard. The rain has plastered his hair to his scalp, which only emphasizes his raw good looks. He's unshaven, his eyes are dark and intense. Again, the line, she remembers, "Can I come in?" The splash of rain on the step becomes a spurt of water as we cut back to present day. The tap has come on suddenly, spraying Christy with water. She jumps back, soaked. S! She reaches to turn the pressure down. The men are struggling with the bed again. Are you okay? Sure, Larry calls to Christy. Again, Julie returns her gaze to the photograph. We go back into Julia's flashback day. The same scene, Frank in the doorstep. Now we cut to the person who opened the door. It's Julia, a younger Julia. Her hair arranged differently, her clothes brighter. It is 2 weeks before her marriage to Larry. She looks at the man on the doorstep without a trace of recognition on her face. You're Julia, right? That's right. Who are you? A dazzling smile appears on his face. I'm Brother Frank. Oh, Julia smiles back. I came for the wedding. He looks at her, eyes glittering. His hold on her is almost mesmeric. There is going to be a wedding. Oh, yes, it will be. Well, can I come in or not? I'm sorry, of course, you're very welcome. He steps inside. Now he is close to her, rain running down his face. We can hear his breath, sense the almost intimidating intimacy of his presence. That's nice to know. Have you got a towel? Julia stares down the photograph in present day, off screen. We hear Christy's voice. Have you got a towel? Julia looks up. At the top of the stairs, Christy's soaked from the tap. Julia looks up and hurriedly pockets the photograph. Christy? Hi, I got soaked. There's a towel in the bathroom. Which is where? Just to your left. Christy ducks into the bathroom. We cut back to Julia. It's clear the memory of her first meeting with Frank has affected her deeply. The tears that threatened earlier are close. Christy has unbuttoned her blouse and is drying herself. Did Dad tell you I got a room, by the way? Waterloo, center of the known universe. Sign from outside. Julia? She puts her head out of the bathroom. Julia has gone. The door of the torture room is pushed open. Julia steps inside. Christy hears the creak of footsteps on the boards above. Julia's behavior puzzles her, but she's not about to waste time thinking too hard about it. She starts downstairs again. We have an odd hovering point of view of Julia. As she steps inside the room, something about the atmosphere distresses her. There is a scratching sound. She looks down. A woodlouse, recalling Frank's forsaken bed, crawls along the edge of the skirting board. She crosses to the window and tears away a little spy hole in the aged newspaper. From downstairs, the voices of the bed movers. The first man. Have you got it? I've got it. I told you. Wait, says Larry. The light through the window falls on her eyes. The screen becomes a whiteout from which emerges Julia's flashbacks again. A bedroom with afternoon sunlight pouring between the slats of bamboo blinds. Outside we can hear children playing summer games. Inside a fly buzzes. Julia, the younger self, is holding her wedding dress in front of her, displaying it. Well, I don't want to see the dress, says Frank. But you said... I don't want to see the dress. Julia lets the dress drop a few inches in front of her. She stares at Frank. You know what I want. Still, she doesn't let the defense that the dress offers, a reminder of her imminent marriage, fall. She stares through it, though, and there's an invitation in her eyes. I want you. Now It cuts to Frank. He is not so beraggled as in the first scene, but the heat of the day has brought a sheen of sweat to his face. Standing half in shadow, he looks almost dangerous. Now Julia lets the dress drop, putting it on the bed behind her. That's better. Frank steps towards her. What about Larry? Forget him. Frank takes hold of her. She doesn't resist him. Though there is barely disguised fear on her face, he puts his hand inside her blouse. An extreme close-up, Julia blinks into the light through the window as Larry's voice from downstairs calls her from her flashbacks. Slowly, will you? Slowly. Again, a whiteout from which emerges Julia's flashback comes back. The two are naked on the bed, both sweating now. Beneath them, the wedding dress crushed under their weight. Their lovemaking is not straightforward. There is an element of erotic perversity in the way Frank is with her, almost like an animal, his hold on her too tight to be loving. The sequence escalates into a series of strange details from their locked bodies, nails digging into the palms, sweat rivers running down their torsos, and once in a while we see their faces. Julia watching Frank, mesmerized and amused by his intensity. Frank almost pained by his desire to push the limits and experiences. Their passion is rendered stranger still by the way the light through the window falls on their bodies, making stripped creatures of them. At last, as their urgency increases, we move up until we're looking directly down on the bed. From here it is Julia's face we can see, and the ecstasy of the moment has seized her. Her arms are flung up over her head. Her eyes are closed as she murmurs many things into his ears. The scene whites out. Julia is still staring into the light. She sobs very quietly. Oh, Frank. Downstairs, Larry and the men have moved the bed across the hall to the bottom of the stairs. All three are weary now and getting careless. As they start up the stairs, we see trouble ahead for Larry, whose hand is moving closer and closer to a nail protruding from the woodwork of the banister. Will you take the weight while I take a step up? He backs towards the stairs and the nail. Darn it, will you take the side of his hand is impaled by the nail. He cries out. The weight of the bed, which he cannot relinquish, drives the nail deeper and gouges a long cut from the ball of his thumb to his wrist. Blood pours out. Ah! What's the problem? My effing hand! He drops his edge of the bed and disengages his hand from the nail upon which he has injured himself. He lifts his hand from which blood is pouring. Oh, freaking buttholes! Who are you calling a freaking butthole? It's this stupid bed that's your freaking problem. Larry isn't listening. He's looking at the wound in his hand. He hates the sight of his own blood. Any moment he may faint. Oh no! But not in front of these people. He turns and starts up the stairs, groggier by the moment. Oh no! Julia is standing in the middle of the room. A single dart of light through the hole she tore in the newspaper strikes her face. Softly on the soundtrack, the scrabbling noise of the woodlice. The bed has been put down. First man and second man are putting on their coats. Christy comes through from the kitchen. What's happening? We're leaving. Where's my father? He's effing off. The second man says in a mocking language, Sorry, he's gone upstairs, so we're effing off too. Second man takes a sheet of paper from his jacket. Will you sign for this bed? Sure. Larry, his hand running with blood, climbs the last flight of stairs. Julia hears him and turns from her silent communing with the room. She crosses towards the door. Too late. It opens. Larry steps inside, blood pouring from his right hand, which he attempts to staunch with his left hand. What have you done? I cut myself. Blood has started to drip, unnoticed by either of them, onto the bare boards. Heavy splashes. Larry looks sick, his face clammy with sweat. She stares at him without a trace of feeling for him on her face. Is it deep? I don't know. I haven't looked. You know me and blood. You're not going to faint. He leans against the wall. Let me see. She goes to him. He looks away as she unglues one hand from the other and looks at the wound. Blood comes faster, hitting the floor between them. It's probably going to need stitches. I'm going to throw up. No, you're not. The blood keeps hitting the floor. Slap, slap, slap. We'll get you out into the fresh air. He is again clamping his hand over the wound as Julia helps him to the door. They leave the torture room. We hear their voices receding down the passageway. As we again assume that hovering viewpoint, the floor is heavily spattered with blood. Take it slowly. So darn stupid. You've done worse. I'll be scarred for life. No, you won't. Christy is halfway up the stairs as Julia and Larry head down. What happened? Just an accident. He's all right. Will you drive? He needs stitches. Sure. The keys are in the kitchen. Christy heads back to the kitchen. Julia helps Larry towards the front door. The camera swings away from them up the stairs and begins to track. We continue to track towards the torture room. Downstairs, the front door slams. From outside, the sound of a car door slamming, an engine starts. The car drives away. We move towards the blood on the floor. As we watch, it begins to disappear as if being absorbed by the room. We pan up to the wall. The plaster is not quite smooth. Indeed, it now begins to grow restless and cracks. Something begins to move in the wall. An explosion of laughter. We cut to the remains of a rack of lamb. Its gravy now congealed, scraps of meat adhering to the bone, here and there. This is the centerpiece of a table, reduced to a battlefield by the guests who are laughing off screen. We pass along the table, taking in dirty plates and cutlery, napkins, glasses, and empty wine bottles. Finally, we reach Julia, who is still sitting at the table while the others have retired to more comfortable seats. She looks utterly miserable and a little drunk. The room has been spruced up for the party. Candles are burning on the tables and mantelpiece. There are pictures on the walls, but this is essentially cosmetic. The place has not been refurnished or redecorated. We move to the party guests. Two are recognized, Christy and Larry, who is presently entertaining the gathering with an account of his accident. The others are new faces, an American couple, Bill Underwood and his wife Evelyn, who are of an age with Larry, and a younger, bespectacled man, a work colleague of Larry's, Steve O'Donnell. All are drunk. A brandy bottle sits on the table between them, and half a dozen other liquor bottles besides. Steve, it soon becomes apparent, has his eyes on Christy. Larry is halfway through his hospital story, gesticulating wildly as he goes through the tale, much to the pleasure of the rest. His hand and lower arm are heavily bandaged. Always hated the sight of my own blood. I go out like a light. Anybody else's, no problem. But mine, goes straight to my head. Anyhow, this darn doctor's poking around, and I'm saying I'm going to pass out. And he's saying, no, you're not. No, you're not. Next thing I know. Now we cut back to Julia, who watched her husband unamused. I wake up on the floor. Gales of laughter at this. And it was him who was looking sick. Haha, probably thought you'd sue. I should do it. Doctors. I know. And he's saying, I'm sorry. He's sorry. Haha. Right. He has picked up the brandy bottle now. Larry looks at them. Anyone for more? Evelyn protests. No. Come on. You're only young once. Larry fills up her glass. To Christy. What are you drinking, love? Christy giggles. I've forgotten. Steve? We're on the Contrail? That's right. Contrail. Steve picks up the bottle. No, Christy says. That's right. Contrail. Steve picks up the bottle. I'll do it. He fills up Christy's glass. I won't be able to stand. So lie down. She casts him a sly glance. He smiles. She smiles. Julia now stands up. Would you excuse me? I think I'm going to bed. Are you okay? Julia nods. Oh, man. I think it's time we were away. He stands. Bill, absolutely not. Sit down. We've got celebrating to do. Julia looks frosty, but Larry does not catch the look. Christy does, however. Bill sits down. Steve looks to Julia. It was a wonderful meal. Evelyn gushes. Oh, it was. It was wonderful. There's a chorus of approval. Julia puts a smile on. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Evelyn says, see you again soon. Bill says, you must come round. Evelyn, yes, you must. We're so happy you're back. That's nice. Well, good night. She exits to a chorus of goodnights. Christy in particular watches her as she makes her exit. Julia's behavior confounds her. Meanwhile, the conversation has returned to Larry's wound. Does it still hurt? Evelyn says. Only when I laugh. This wins another round of laughter. Julia walks along the landing while the laughter, muted by distance, wafts up from below. From the floor above, she hears something more. She stops, puzzled, then starts up the second flight of stairs towards the torture room. She approaches the torture room and steps inside. The sound of laughter is considerably dimmed in here. It's barely audible, but there is another sound, a shifting sound in the corner of the room. She reaches for the light switch and turns it on. The bulb has been broken, however. She stares around the room, trying to make sense of the shadows. Nervously, she approaches the wall, on which 4 streaks of light from the window fall. Now she looks towards the window and realizes that the newspaper has been torn as if by 4 fingers. Her breath catches. Suddenly she's afraid. She stands absolutely still, eyes wide in the gloom. Who's there? On the far side of the room, a movement in the shadows. Julia almost retreats, but something keeps her staring into the murk, as something, the remnants of a human form made of twisted, blistered strands of flesh, raises its head, is squatting against the wall, unable to lift itself into a standing position. Its eyes, however, have life in them and hunger. This, though he's unrecognizable, it's Frank. Julia. Oh my gosh! Don't look at me. Who are you? I said don't look. She looks away. Help me. Tell me who you are. Frank. Julia's face registers horror and disbelief. No. Gosh, no. Believe me, it's me. It's really me. What happened to you? His blood. On the floor. It brought me back. Back from where? Just help, will you? Please, gosh, help me. From downstairs, dimly laughter. Larry has just told another story. General drunken laughter. Christy stands up. Steve says, You're not going? I'm just upstairs. She staggers a little bit. Need any help? I am house-trained. Further hysteria. Covered in embarrassment. No, I meant... It's round on the left, Larry says. I know. She steps out into the hallway. She starts up the stairs. She smiles to herself, thinking of Steve. Frank in the corner of the room watches Julia, who is still at the door. Somebody. Shh. The sound of Christy downstairs, closing the bathroom door. You can't let me stay like this, please. You can't. What do you want me to do? The blood brought me this far. I need more of the same, or I'll slip back. Julia's lace as she stares at Frank once more. She is appalled at the choice before her. You have to heal me. Christy smiles at herself in the bathroom mirror, turns off the tap, opens the door, and steps out onto the landing. She takes a step along the landing, then realizes that there is somebody ahead of her. In the darkness, she stops. From the floor above, a soft sigh. Hello? Julia moves out of the shadow into a patch of patterned light, splashing up the stairwell. The effect recalls her memory of her lovemaking with Frank. The light makes her look strange, ominous. Oh, it's you. Julia doesn't smile. Are you all right? Do we read murder in Julia's eyes? Christy is uneasy. Suddenly, a voice from the floor below. It's Steve. Christy? Christy's relieved at the interruption. I'm here. I thought we'd lost you. I'm coming. Sleep well, Julia. Julia is left on the landing as Christy heads downstairs. The station is deserted, but Christy and Steve are sitting, waiting for the last train at the bus station now. You know, I do know the way home. It's late. Not that late. Please, I want to see you home, all right? All right. No, that's nice. If there's a train. What do we do if there isn't? We walk. Christy and Steve are walking. Why don't you stay at Larry's house? There's plenty of room. Yeah, there's room, and there's Julia. I see. She's so darn English. Meaning what? Oh, I don't know. Uptight, frigid. Steve stops walking. I beg your pardon. And there you go. I beg your pardon. We're not all frigid. Christy has turned to look at him. Both of them are aware where the banter is leading. Smiles play on their faces as they speak. Oh, no? No. It's not what I heard. Steve moves closer to her. Well, you've been just talking to the wrong people. He kisses her with considerable feeling. Larry snores loudly. Julia lies beside him, wide awake, staring at the ceiling. Larry turns over, muttering to himself. The door opens. Julia is standing there in her nightgown at the torture room. Frank raises his wretched head. Well? Julia stares at the thing moving in the shadow. Yes. The door opens. Julia steps out of the house and starts toward the streets. As she does so, she glances around. We approach the window, knowing that Frank watches behind it. Julia heads off down the street. The den of a lunchtime restaurant with all the tables full and everyone hungry. In the middle of the melee, Christy is valiantly trying to do 6 things at once. Somebody wants their order taken. Somebody else wants more lager. Somebody else is complaining. She's doing her best, but losing the battle. She serves the table with their food and then starts back to pick up another order. As she does so, she's boxed in from every side. Excuse me, miss. I'd like some more lager, miss. In a moment. Did you hear me? Christy starts back to the counter. As she does so, somebody else's voice cuts through the den. Hey, sexy bomb. She wheels around. It's Steve. You keep your... Oh, Steve, it's you. Hi. I just called in. How about tonight? I don't finish till 12. I'm a late riser. He grins. She grins. What do you have to do to get some serves around here? Catch you later, Steve says. By contrast, a quiet bar, discreet music, a well-dressed clientele, several couples occupy booths, other solitary drinkers are at the bar. Amongst them is Julia. Now we see her more closely. We realize she's gone to some considerable effort to make herself ravishing. There's nothing crude about the change. It's a subtle transformation which shows off her considerable beauty. She drinks soda water. She has an admirer sitting alone at one of the tables. He's a middle-aged man by the name of Prudhoe, a nervous, slightly paunchy individual. She glances over at him. His eyes don't leave her for a moment. He's trying his best to get the courage to approach her. She looks away and concentrates on her drink. Now she takes out a cigarette, fumbling for it. Her hands are trembling slightly. She lights the cigarette, draws on it, and as she does so, she seems to make up her mind that she's not the equal of it. She stubs the cigarette out, puts cash on the bar for her drinks, and gets up to leave. Suddenly, Prudhoe is at her side. Not much fun, is it? What? Drinking alone? Not much. I wonder, maybe. He's so nervous he can barely speak. As we're both on our own, we could have one drink together. Julia looks at him. He seems almost be offering himself to her. There's a long pause while she tries to make up her mind. Why not? She smiles. The smile works wonders. Prudhoe's nervousness diminishes somewhat. Julia's simply increase. Now that she's committed herself, again she opens the pack of cigarettes as Prudhoe calls the barman over. What are you drinking? Just soda. Plain soda? Please. I try not to drink at lunchtime. Makes me sleepy in the afternoon. You like to keep a clear head, eh? 1 soda, 1 whiskey. I do it anyway. No willpower. Got a busy afternoon. Julia looks at him. That depends. Oh. He stares at her, not certain he interpreted her correctly. He stares back. Then the tiniest of smiles, which he's scarcely believing his luck, returns. We go back to the torture room. The camera moves across the room. We can hear Frank's ragged breathing. And as we move in, we see, on the floor beside him, the box. The lament configuration, its sides gleaming. Frank, still squatting on the floor, taps a tattoo on the bare boards with his skeletal fingers. Then voices outside. Julia laughs. He raises his head. Julia opens the front door. She is still very nervous, fumbling with her keys. Prudhoe stands a pace behind her. They step inside. Julia closed the door. You know, it's not often there's a first time for everything. I suppose that's right. You want something to drink? I'm already way over my usual limit. You know, it's funny. I feel like I've known you for years. He approaches her, his gestures made slightly clumsy by the alcohol he's drunk. He kisses her. She presses him off of her. Oh, come on. He takes hold of her breasts. It's what you brought me here for, isn't it? Yes. I just think we'd be better off upstairs. Oh, fine. Frank's view from the corner of the room, we hear the sound of Julia and Prudhow's approach up the stairs. This your place? Let's not talk about it. No personal details, right? Right. You know, you're incredible. Julia opens the door. Come on in. Make yourself at home. She steps inside. Prudhow does as he's instructed. He stares at the bare floor as Julia closes the door behind him. There's no bed. That's right. Huh? I prefer the floor. First time for everything, right? Right. Julia moves towards him. Why don't you take off your jacket? You're warm. Yeah, why don't I? She slips the knots of his tie. We can hear her pulse on the soundtrack. She glances over Prudhow's shoulder. He follows her gaze, but she diverts him with a peck on the cheek. Why don't you do the same? Prudhow starts to take off his clothes. Maybe I will. Prudhow now starts to shed his jacket and trousers, trying not to take his eyes off Julia for an instant. We watch from Frank's point of view as he drops his underwear. He still wears his shirt, which he starts to unbutton. We move back into a tighter shot. You know, you're very beautiful. Am I? You know you are. Loveliest woman I ever set eyes on. Julia smiles. Prudhow stops unbuttoning his shirt. Oh, man. What's wrong? Too much drink. Better empty my bladder. She steps out of the way so that he can cross to the door. I'll be a moment. As he moves to the door, she throws a piece of cloth over a hammer, which lies beside the wall. Prudhow takes hold of the door handle, turns it. It's stuck. The door is stuck. Before he can turn, she hits him on the back of the head. He doesn't fall, but the blow sends blood down the back of his shirt. To avoid the following blow, he stumbles blindly towards the wall, but Julia is not going to be stopped now. He holds the back of his head, dazed, apologetic, pitiful, while she moves towards him. Don't. Please, I'm sorry. She eclipses him. I'm so sorry. She raises the hammer. I don't understand. She strikes him. He slides down the wall, his jaw broken, blood pouring from his face. He twitches, then the twitches stop. She drops the hammer and stares down at the corpse. Enough. The room sighs. In the corner, Frank's shadowy form leans forward. Don't look at me. Julia backs toward the door as the broken skeletal form crawls out of the darkness to claim its sustenance. Julia steps out onto a landing and leans against the wall, waves of sheer relief breaking over her. In the room behind her, terrible sounds of feeding. Julia steps into the bathroom and looks at herself in the mirror. Blood is spattered on her face. Her hands are similarly stained. She is trembling from head to foot. Stripping off her blouse and flinging it over the side of the bath, she douses her face, neck, and boobs with cold water. Then she neck and breast with cold water. Then she stares up at her face again, examining it. She can scarcely believe what she's done. She crossed the landing and climbs the stairs to the torture room. She opens the door. As she does so, Frank retreats into the shadows. We are granted a fleeting glimpse of him, his body fuller than before, but still horribly vulnerable. Julia looks at Prudhow's corpse. A trail of blood leads away from it into the darkness. The body itself is a grotesque, misshapen husk now. The muscle and fat withered, the eyes sunk into the skull, the lips drawn back to expose the gums, a ghostly sight. Oh my goodness. Julia looks across at Frank, who is no longer sitting but standing in the shadows. Do I disgust you? She doesn't reply. He stretches his arm into a passage of light. His flesh glistens and pulses. See? It's making me whole again. He turns his arm over for her appreciation. Every drop of blood you spill puts more flesh on my bones. And we both want that, don't we? She nods. Good. Come here. She stares, unable to move. Come here, darn you. I want to touch you. Still, she doesn't move. Come to Daddy. I only want to touch. She takes a step towards his outstretched arm. His fingers touch her face. She steels herself against them. Now he starts to trace the line of her jaw, stroking her. Now her lips caressingly. Suddenly a sound from downstairs. The front door is opening. It's Larry from below. Sweetheart? Julia withdraws from his touch. Where are you? Shot from the stairs of Larry. He looks up the flight. She takes a step towards the stairs. Julia takes a step backwards, her foot hitting Prudhow's corpse. Larry is still at the bottom of the stairs. Are you there? For a moment, it looks as though he's going to climb the stairs. Then he thinks better of it and goes through to the back of the house. Julia has wrapped the corpse of Prudhow up in its clothes and is now lifting it. The body is lighter now, having been drained of nourishment. Its head lolls back and its dentures drop out. Hitting the floor loudly, she freezes. No sound from below. She backs out of the room with her burden. Frank's arm reaches for the fallen dentures and peers at them. Who's a pretty boy, then? Soft laughter from the darkness. Julia pushes the door of the junk room, which is on the upper landing, open. Inside, a chaos of tea chests and bric-a-brac. She lays the body down. Larry has come through to look for Julia. He hears a noise above. He looks up. Julia? He leaves the kitchen. Again, Larry steps into the hallway and gazes up the stairs. Are you there? He starts up. Julia steps into the bathroom and then locks the door behind her. Larry ascends to the top of the stairs. Julia? I'm here. Sweetheart, I've been calling you. He tries the door. It's locked. Are you all right? Just feeling a bit sick. Aw, babe. Julia, still trembling, sits on the edge of the bath. I'll be okay. Just leave me be a while. Can I get you anything? Maybe a brandy? Sure. I'll be down in a minute. Okay. She listens to his footsteps recede down the landing and stares. Then she crosses to the mirror and tries to erase the signs of panic. She puts a comb through her hair and adjusts her blouse. That done, she unbolts the door and steps out into the landing. She doesn't go down, however, but up, back to the torture room. She opens the door. Frank? A crunching sound in the shadows. Frank's hand opens, drops the pieces of Prudhow's dentures, which he has been crushed, onto the floor in a rain of plastic teeth. I'm hurting. Hurting? My nerves are beginning to work again. Good. One more, maybe two. Julia's fate registers no horror at this. To heal me completely. Then we can be away from here before they come looking. Who? The Cenobites. It's only a matter of time before they find I've slipped them. I have to get away from here. From downstairs. Julia, are you all right? Julia crosses to the door and calls down. Just a moment. Put on some music, will you, babe? Okay. She returns to her conversation with Frank. Poor Larry, obedient as ever. Keep your voice down. She crosses to close the door. When she turns around, he's in front of her, silhouetted against the window, his half-formed face terrifying in the gloom. Suddenly he reaches out and catches hold of her arm. She gasps in pain. Shh. Don't want babe to hear. You're hurting me. You won't cheat me, will you? You'll stay with me, help me. Then we can be together, the way we were before. We belong to each other now, for better or worse. He lets go of her, like love, only real. She goes to the door and leaves him, locking it behind her. We move close to Frank's face. He licks his skinned lips with a bloody tongue. Thunder rolls. We are now in Christie's dream. The thunder carries over to a dream. We are in the dining room of number 55, except that everything is once more shrouded in sheets. We cut to Christie moving through the room, her face pale, her hair glued to her forehead with sweat. Somewhere a bell is ringing, flies buzz. On the dinner table a form is covered in a sheet. It's clear that the shape is human. She reaches the table and looks at the body. Suddenly blood begins to seep through the shroud, beginning at the head, eyes, and mouth, then straining across the body. There are sobs beneath the shroud. She reaches for it to snatch it off the body. The blood has almost turned the sheet scarlet. She pulls. We glimpse only a moment of what's beneath, a naked body, scarlet, shining with blood from head to toe. She screams. Her scream becomes louder as we cut to Christie in her room. Steve sits bolt upright in bed while Christie yells. The sheet is snatched off him. He looks across the room to see Christie at the end of the bed with the sheet in her hand. What are you doing? Christie's eyes are still closed. Christie? Her eyes open. She looks down at the sheet she snatched from the bed and drops it in horror. Goodness, what was that about? Christie, weak with fear, just shakes her head. A phone is ringing. Larry crosses the hallway, bleary-eyed, and disappears from sight. The phone is picked up. Hello? Julia lies in bed, the pillow empty beside her. She's wide awake, staring at the ceiling. Downstairs, the murmur of Larry's voice. Frank stands in the corner of the torture room, breathing softly in the shadows. Larry is on the phone. I'm okay, honey. It's all right. Christie is on the phone. Steve sits up in bed, having reclaimed the sheet. I just wanted to be sure you were okay. Never better. You sleep well. Yeah, Christie said on the phone. I love you, honey. I love you too. Larry puts down the phone. Larry returns to the bedroom. Who was it? Christie. He goes into the bedroom. We pan up the second flight of stairs. Frank is seen at the top, in the shadows. Soft as a breath. Christie. That's what he says to himself. The front door is closed by Julia. A man stands in the hallway, another victim. He is as nervous as Prudhoe. You're sure we're not going to be interrupted? Quite sure. Only I like to be careful. A shock cut to the naked victim, thrown back against the wall from Julia's hammer blow. Before he can even slide down the wall, Frank is upon him. We don't linger, but cut away. As Julia closes the door, her face devoid of emotion, we see the victim's body on the floor, with Frank's hands on its head, draining out its energies. Julia sits, sipping a drink, her face still unreadable. Frank is standing in the shadows. The victim's body is in the middle of the room. Julia enters. Well? Better. Much better. I'd like some clothes and maybe a cigarette. Then you tell me. You explain what's happened to you. Of course. We pan across the walls as Frank speaks. I wanted to experience pleasures that only they could offer. The Cenobites? That's what they call themselves. They're not human. Maybe they once were, but they're not now. They rearranged their own flesh for pleasure. We moved across to Frank now. He is dressed in loose-fitting jacket and trousers, through which his blood is seeping. He smokes, taking great pleasure in the experience. And the box? Frank picks up the box. Vague, tantalizing forms move over the surface like ghosts. It cost me a fortune. All I had. It's a puzzle, you see. You solve it, and the Cenobites come through. Where from? Who knows? Sometimes I think they're just behind the walls. He turns the box over. The lacquer catches the light. So they cheated you. In the lacquer we see oiled bodies moving. It's difficult to be sure what the forms signify. Is this torture or some elaborate pleasure? Oh no, they kept their bargain. They gave me experiences I'd never forget. The images in the lacquer are becoming clearer, and they are appalling. Flesh torn open, blood running across the sweating flesh, hooks and terrible machines. But their pleasure was my pain. His voice has begun to tremble. The images in the box are more horrific by the moment, and flowing between them, highly distorted, the Cenobites' faces, and that of Frank screaming and screaming. Terrible pain. Appalling. He can't speak for a moment. After a pause, he does on his voice, but his voice is heavy. My body was forfeit, but my spirits, they left that here, on the boards, in the walls, watching the world, but never able to touch it. And the blood let you out? There are ways for resurrection. Blood's one of them. I won't let them take me back, Julia. Julia looks at the horrors in the box and understands his desire. I want to be whole and then get out. He lifts the box up. I won't let them take me. You won't have to. We'll be gone. Somewhere they'll never find us. There's a rumble of thunder. Not in the whole wide world. More thunder and the sound of heavy rain against the windows. The television is on. Larry and Julia are sitting on the couch. Larry's watching a boxing match. He has consumed several beers. The cans are beside his feet, and there's another in his hand. Julia reads a magazine, glancing up at the screen to see the match getting more heated. Blood is starting to flow. Is this upsetting you? I've seen worse. Larry looks at her. Are you all right? Fine. Only I'll turn it off. There's a sudden raising of shouts from the screen as one of the boxers hits the canvas. Larry turns his attention back to the match. And he's down. He's down. The thunder rolls. The lightning finds its way through the holes in the newspaper. Frank is watching through the window, his face occasionally washed with light. His hand on the window frame taps out the same tattoo he's tapped out before. He turns away from the window, and his foot catches the box. It rolls away across the floor. In the dining room, it's nighttime. The boxing match is heating up again. And now he's in trouble. He's really in trouble. What was that? Julia looks up from her magazine. Thunder. The violence on the screen is horrific as swollen faces burst beneath punches. No, something else. Larry stands up. Maybe I left the window open. She gets up and crosses to the door. I'll go see. No, I'll do it. He opens the door and steps out into the hallway. In such tight close-up, we can see that Frank has in fact left the torture room. We see his features registered as somebody is coming. Larry is climbing the stairs. Julia follows. It's nothing. Larry has reached the top of the stairs. He looks up the next flight. Larry? What's wrong with you? She's desperate to stop him climbing to the torture room. I just hate the thunder. He crosses to her. I'm here. He puts his arms around her. She responds. You're shaking. He hugs her tight, kissing her lightly. The thunder shakes the house. There's nothing to be afraid of. He kisses her neck, his hands restless on her. I'll just go check upstairs. He kisses her again. She, in order to distract him, kisses him back. Her passion is artificial, but he doesn't register that. Oh, baby. Don't go upstairs. Come with me then. He starts up the stairs. Please. He reaches the top of the stairs. First he throws open the junk room. Lightning flashes on boxes inside. Then he moves towards the torture room. The thunder rolls more loudly. She follows him along the landing, desperate to stop him. Too late. He throws open the door. Don't! Lightning floods the room. It's empty. She stands beside him at the door. We must have rats. She looks back down the stairs. Where's Frank gone? Larry turns to her, holding her again on the threshold of the torture room. See? Quite safe. He kisses her much harder this time, a sexual kiss. Let's go down. I'll make it better. He kisses her again. A shadow moves across the screen as the door opens and Larry puts on the light. He has hold of Julia's hand. He leads her inside. She sits on the bed, illuminated by the light from the landing and the occasional flicker from the window. Larry kneels between her legs and kisses her, his eyes closed. Julia glances into the shadows of the room. She senses Frank's presence. He starts to unbutton her dress. She's distracted by her suspicions. He has his hands against her almost before she realizes what's happening. We have her point of view as she looks around the room, the dressing table, the wardrobe, the curtains. At the window, does something move in the shadows? A flash of lightning? No, there's nothing. Larry gets onto the bed and draws her against him, kissing her. This is not the intense, slightly dangerous lovemaking she experienced with Frank, but a fumbling, slightly foolish exchange. Larry is so wrapped in attempting to make the right moves, he doesn't register the fact that Julia's attention is elsewhere. Now we have a point of view from the far side of the room of the two figures on the bed. The only sound, the thunder, and Larry's murmured words of seduction, which we can barely make out. I love you, honey. Let me love you. Neither of them have undressed fully. There's just a tangle of clothes around them which removes any trace of eroticism from the scene. A close-up of Julia's head laid on the pillow shows just how uninvolved she is. While Larry works, eyes closed, Julia looks down at the length of her husband's body. The door of the wardrobe swings open. Frank is watching. She registers horror. Larry's oblivious to all of this, of course. We have a close-up of Frank watching the lovemaking. Now he steps out of the wardrobe. Julia makes a sound of horror, which Larry takes as enthusiasm. I love you. From Julia's point of view, we see the form of Frank shamble towards the lovers. From Frank's point of view, we see the lovers on the bed. Larry's back vulnerable. Julia seems to realize what he intends. No. Larry barely hears her. Frank is at the very end of the bed now, and Julia becomes highly agitated. No, you mustn't. Please, no. Larry stops his lovemaking, looks at her. Huh? Please. What's wrong with you? Almost sobbing. Please, I can't bear it. Larry is angered and utterly perplexed at this. He disengages his arms from around her. Julia's point of view as Frank retreats. Larry rolls off Julia. The wardrobe door closes and clicks. I don't understand you. One moment you're all over me, the next it's, don't touch me. He sits on the edge of the bed. I just don't understand. He gets up and leaves the bedroom. Julia remains where she is. We have a shot of the bed and her upon it from Frank's end of the room. She stares at the wardrobe. Through the crack of the open door, Frank stares back. A flicker of lightning illuminates his face, his skeletal grin. Softly beneath the assault of the rain on the roof, we hear laughter. Christy and Larry are sitting eating a meal together in an intimate restaurant. Larry has little appetite to judge by his plate. He looks as if he hasn't slept for several nights. Christy, by contrast, is sparkling. Maybe we should never have come back. Maybe you should give it some time, I guess. Skirting her real feelings. She's not like Mom. She's, I don't know, moody. I thought that was what you liked about her. You don't like her at all, do you? Larry said. The straightforward question silenced Christy for a moment. She wants to be delicate with her father's feelings, but honest at the same time. I don't know her. She's so sealed up. Larry's face is full of the desire for reassurance. Christy tries to offer it. If you love her, she must be worth loving. Just give me some time. Larry nods, a weak smile on his face. She doesn't even want to leave the house. Really? It's like she's waiting for something. What? I don't know. It's beyond me. Silence. Would you maybe call round sometime? Try and make friends? Sure. Maybe all she needs is some company. Frank is standing at the top of the stairs, dressed in his stained suit. Julia is a few steps down, staring up at him. You can't love him. I don't. So where's the harm? I said no. Then find me somebody else before they come looking. Julia nods. Tomorrow? She looks at him. A wind blows, carrying autumn leaves before it, and on the wind the distant pealing of bells. Julia is at the door, turning the key in the lock. Beside her, a third sacrificial lamb, bold and excitable. His name is Sykes. Julia opens the door. At the corner of the street now, Christy, she watches puzzled. A long shot of the house from Christy's point of view. The man on the steps seems to have second thoughts. Julia speaks with him. We can hear none of this exchange, but Julia manages to coax him inside. She closed the door behind him. Christy stands bewildered by what she sees. From the top of the stairs, we watch Julia lead Sykes upstairs. I get lonely sometimes. Everybody does. Christy starts toward the house. In the corner of the room, Frank stands, tapping out the rhythm with his fingers. It's Colonel Bogey, and now he hums it too. Outside the door, a footfall. Come in. The humming stops. Julia opens the door. Christy starts down the path. Sykes is looking at Julia. What is this, a game? Frank moves in the corner. Sykes catches the motion from the corner of his eye. He turns. What? Frank steps from the shadows. No! Julia hits him with the hammer. Christy hears Sykes scream. She freezes, then steps back from the doorstep and looks up at the house. In the room, pandemonium. Sykes, blood pouring down his face, flails out at Julia. The hammer flies from her hand. He lunges for the door, but she manages to kick it closed. Help me! Help me! Christy makes her way around the back of the house. Sykes has taken hold of Julia and is using her as a shield against Frank, who is bearing down upon him. For the first time, we see Frank's true colors where Julia is concerned. Don't! Casually, Frank throws Julia aside. She falls sobbing. Frank descends on Sykes. No! Sykes' scream covers the sound of Christy forcing the back door open. She steps inside. Frank has Sykes' face to the wall. Sykes is sobbing now. The room is covered in blood. Get out of here, Frank says to Julia. She picks herself up. Sykes says to Julia, please, don't let him kill me, please. Julia leaves, closing the door. Frank seizes hold of Sykes' neck, his fingers entering the flesh either side of his neck vertebrae. Sykes screams. Christy moves through the house and starts to climb the stairs. Halfway up the stairs, the scream stops. She climbs the rest of the way, surrounded by a graveyard hush. A soundless, slowed shot as Sykes, his face wasted by Frank's feeding, breaks from Frank's hold and lunges for the door. Christy starts up the second flight of stairs. The same slowed, soundless horror as Sykes reaches the door. Frank is a pace behind him. Christy reaches the top at the torture room. The door from inside the room, Sykes pulls it open. In real time, accompanied by the most horrific shrieks, Sykes flings himself from the torture room. The flesh is hanging off his face, his eyes bulge in terror. Seeing Christy starts toward her. Behind him, Frank, his body glistening. He catches hold of Sykes by the neck. Sykes shrieks, stop. The eyes glaze over. The body shudders as death claims it. Then Frank drops the corpse and looks up at Christy. Oh my gosh! She starts to back away down the stairs. Julia! Christy? He takes a step toward her. Keep your freaking distance. Julia, where's Julia? Oh my gosh, what have you done with her? She's still backing away. He's still advancing. Christy, it's Frank. It's Uncle Frank. No! You remember? No! Come to Daddy. Her puzzlement, however, has slowed her retreat, and now Frank reaches for her. At the last moment, she backs away again, but he's after her in a beat and seizes hold of her. No, get the freak off me! He drags her back up the stairs. He pushes her ahead of him into the torture room. He closes the door. You've grown. you're beautiful." She has retreated as far from him as she can get. He advances on her. "Don't touch me, or so help me." What? What will you do? What can you do? There's nothing to be frightened of. Frank has closed in on her by now. He takes hold of her face. "I bet you make your daddy proud, don't you, beautiful?" "This isn't happening." I used to tell myself that. Used to try and pretend I was dreaming all the pain, but why kid yourself? Some things have to be endured. Take it from me, and that makes the pleasure so much sweeter. As he leans in to kiss her, she snatches hold of the pus and blood-stained shirt that's glued to his abdomen and pulls. There's a flow of fluids. Frank's head is thrown back and he screams. She slips from beneath his grasp, but he's after her in a moment, his hand catching her blouse. It tears, his fingers rake her bare skin. She stumbles, reaches out for the wall, which is slick with Sykes' blood. Her hand slides over it. She falls heavily. Roaring, Frank comes in pursuit of her. On the floor in front of Christy, the box. It's a poor weapon, but it's all she's got. As he comes after her again, she stands up and delivers a blow to his head with the box. He howls. She races for the door, but he's after her. He shrieks and he strikes her. She's thrown against the wall. He's furious now. Strikes her again. She cannot survive much more. She raises the box to retaliate. Frank sees what she's holding. His attack stops. "Give that to me." She dimly realizes that she has a bargaining tool. "No." "One last time, give me the box." "You want it?" The monster's eyes glitter. "Effing have it!" She throws the box. It sails past Frank and smashes through the window. "No!" He goes to the window. She takes her chance. She's out of the door in a moment. "No!" Christy propels herself out of the room and down the stairs while Frank vents his anger above her. She flings open the front door and pitches herself bleeding and bruised into the daylight beyond. As she stumbles away down the path, she sees the box at her feet. In a litter of broken glass, she picks it up and continues to run. A series of shots from Christy's point of view as she staggers along the street. The soundtrack winds. The image threatens to be eclipsed by darkness. People stare at her as she runs. A child points. Finally, the camera slows. She stands still. A voice off the camera. "Are you all right?" The camera swings giddily around in the direction of the speaker. A woman comes into view. "Do you need help?" As she speaks, the picture fades to white. The witnesses continue to fill the screen. The whiteness continues to fill the screen. Distant, incoherent voices are heard, and the thump of blood in the inner ear. Then darkness seeps into the whiteness patterns like word charge, ink blots, ambiguous yet interpretable as sexual or horrific imagery, with the darkness soaking over the scene like blood through the sheet. In her first dream, fragments of Frank's previous dialogue. "Come to Daddy." "This isn't happening." "Some things have to be endured." The darkness is filling the room, filling the screen. "Take it from me." Now total darkness. "Come to Daddy." And suddenly she wakes. Christy is lying in bed in a private room. A nurse is at her bedside, monitoring her conditions. "You're awake." She goes to the door. "I'll get the doctor." She exits. Christy tries to sit up. Her head hurts badly as she achieves a sitting position. The door opens. The nurse returns with a doctor. "So, you're back with us." I think so." "How are you feeling?" "Tender." "You took quite a beating. Do you remember what happened?" She looks at him, uncertain of where to start. "I went to speak to my father." The doctor nods. "Of course. We'll bring you a telephone." The nurse exits. The doctor brings the box from his pocket. "Maybe this will jog your memory?" He lays it on the bed. She stares at it, her expression betraying nothing. "I had the devil's own job getting it out of your hand. Does it ring any bells?" She shakes her head. Do you want it left?" "Why not?" He offers her a reassuring smile. "Chin up. There's no serious damage, and you're safe here." He leaves the room. Christy picks up the box tentatively. She turns it over in her hand. examining it. Frank is standing in the shadows. He is wearing a fresh shirt. He smirks. Julia watches him. Downstairs, telephone rings. Julia is very nervous now, desperate even. She'll tell them everything. I don't think so. She'll want Larry first. That's probably her now, or the police. Maybe. Don't you care? There's very little I can do about it. Maybe we should just leave. Like this. Look at me. Like this. Well, we can't just stay here. I need a skin. Then we leave. Christy is sitting up in bed. On the bedside table, a telephone. She is now thoroughly engrossed in the problems of the box. Her fingers speed over the surface, looking for some way in, testing the strength. Suddenly a click. Her face lights up with pleasure as she slides a part of the box open, revealing new intricacies, and to accompany the revelation, a tinkling tune. She smiles. It's a musical box. The light beside the bed flickers, but she doesn't notice. The door opens. It's the nurse. Comfortable? Sure. And luck with your father? Shakes her head. He's probably got a meeting. I called a friend of mine. He's coming. Is that okay? Of course. The nurse exits. As she does, the light flickers again. The box clicks. A new facet is revealed. Christy smiles. The front door closes at the house. Julia? Larry says. Larry stands in the hall. Julia comes down the stairs. She looks pale, even ill. What's wrong? I don't know where to begin. What are you talking about? It's better you see for yourself. She turns and starts up the stairs. He follows. Now back at the hospital. Christy has opened more of the box. The tune is more complex now. Somewhere a bell has started to ring. Now she works the final mechanism of the box. The bedside light flickers and goes out. The bell rings. Light pours out of the box. She drops it, shocked. The bedside light comes on again. She looks up. In the wall, opposite the end of her bed, a very narrow doorway has simply opened in the wall. Leaving the box on the bed, she gets up and goes to the gap. As she approaches, she hears the distant rhythmic sob of a baby. She stands at the doorway. We look back at her, a diminutive figure framed against a shot of light from way, way down the corridor. The sobbing goes on. Christy stares down the corridor, which is lit brightly in some places and is absolutely dark in others. Not certain of whether to venture down it or not, she glances towards the door of her room, from the other side of which comes the reassuring sound of the hospital going about its business. What's the fear? She steps into the corridor. The walls rise against the darkness to either side of her, their surface like the interior of a pyramid pitted with age and rotting away. She starts toward the sobbing child, bare feet on the impacted earth of the passageway. The sobbing gets louder as she advances, her form disappearing entirely as she passes through the intermittent darkness. Once she glances back towards the hospital room to reassure herself that it's still there, it is, though, it's no more than a sliver of light at the far end of the passageway. She advances a few more paces. The atmosphere is growing denser. Smoke thickens the air. Then a light grows at the other end of the corridor. The sound of the sobbing child ceases. She stops walking. Ahead, the smoke clears, and the light brightens, and we see a creature, the engineer, hanging in the space between the walls. It is silhouetted against the light, but we can see enough to know that it resembles no earthly animal. Its vast black limbs hold it suspended above the corridor, clicking to the stone. Its front limbs, vestigial by comparison, hang down from beneath its vast head, its tail curled over its back. Chrissy's expression registers this horror. The engineer moves into the light, its irises narrow to slits. From the tail, a vast stinger oozing pus like venom glides into view, and then It comes at her, advancing along the corridor by bracing its legs against the walls. Its breath is a growl in its belly until it moves into darkness. When all sound from it ceases, only interrupted again as it finds the light, Christy turns and starts to run. It comes after her at speed. Darkness, light, roars in silence. Its jaws spill its thick saliva, its eyes gleam. Christy runs blindly down the corridor back towards safety of the hospital room, but it's very close on her heels, lingering. As she comes within a few yards of the room, it closes on her. She flings herself through the door with the engineer's breath on her back and turns. The doorway is gone. The wall is sealed. She approaches the wall. The engineer scratched on the other side. Then she realizes that the bell is still ringing, and there's a foul smell in the air. She looks around. She's not alone. Standing across the room from her, lit by a strange phosphorescence that has no visible source, are 4 extraordinary figures. They are Cenobites. Each of them is horribly mutilated by systems of hooks and pins. The garments they wear are elaborately constructed to marry with their flesh, laced through skin in places hooked into bone. The leader of this quartet has pins driven into his head at inch intervals. At his side, a woman whose neck is pinned open like a vivisection specimen. Accompanying them is a creature whose mouth is wired into a gaping rectangle, the exposed teeth sharpened to points, and a fat, sweating monster whose eyes are covered by thick, dark glasses. When the lead Cenobite speaks, we recognize the voice as that of the creature from the beginning of the film. Christy stares in amazement. "Where the hell did you come from?" The Cenobite gestures. The box is lying on the bed. "The box. You opened it. We came." "It's just a puzzle box." "It's a means to summon us. It's called the Lament Configuration." "Who are you?" "Cenobites. Explorers in the further regions of experience. Demons to some, angels to others." "Well, I don't mean to open that thing. You can go back wherever you came from." "We can't. We can't. Not alone." At this, the creature with the wired open jaw chatters like a mad monkey. "This isn't for real." "You solved the box. We came. Now you must come with us. Taste our pleasures." The chattering Cenobite steps towards her. "Don't touch me." The door opens. It's Steve. Christy's face floods with relief. Steve does not register Cenobite's presence, however. "Steve, thank goodness you came." What happened to you?" He steps between the Cenobites. "These things, they want to take me." "What things?" "He doesn't see us or hear us. We belong to you, Christy, and you to us." "No." "What's wrong?" "Don't let them take me, Steve." "I won't let anybody take you." He starts to walk toward her, but the creature in the dark glasses takes a hooked rod from his back and puts the hook to Steve's neck. Steve's hand moves to the place. He makes a small sound of pain. The Cenobite takes off his glasses to see its trick better. The eyes beneath are sewn shut. It pulls a little more on the hook. Steve winces. "If he takes another step, we open his throat," the female Cenobite says. Please go, Steve." "What?" "Just go, please. I'll be okay. I'm going to see Dad. He'll look after me." What did I say?" "Will you go, darn it?" Mystified, Steve retreats a step. "I'll come back later, huh?" "Sure, why not?" Still puzzled, Steve crosses to the door. "Bye." "Bye." "Good. It's time we were away." Almost crying, "Let me alone. Let me alone, will you?" "No, please, no tears. It's a waste of good suffering." The chatterer comes for her. As it does so, desperation brings a plan to Christy's head. "Wait!" He stops. No time for argument. You did this before, right? Many times. To a man called Frank Cotton. Oh, yes. But he escaped you. Nobody escapes us. He did. I've seen him. He's alive. Is that so? And what are you proposing? I'll take you to him. Then you take him instead of me. Back wherever you come from. The Cenobite stares at her, unblinking. Perhaps. But if you cheat us. The sound of the engineer scratching on the other side of the wall. The plaster cracks violently. We'll tear your soul apart. We cut back to the cracking plaster, which cracks further. We hear Steve's voice and pan back into the room. The door opens. Christy and Cenobites have gone. Steve is there with the nurse. She was trembling all over. I'd better go look for her. The nurse heads for the door. Maybe she's gone back to her. He looks around. The nurse has gone. Father. His eyes have alighted on the box, which is lying on the bed. He picks it up. Lights burn in the house, upstairs and down. Julia sits in front of the dressing table mirror. She has a glass of whiskey in front of her. She sips from it, studying her face in the mirror. We've seen her in many moods through the story. Now we see a mingling of fear and exhilaration on her face. She gets up, laid out on the bed, all of her things and her wedding gown. Steve drives toward Lodovico Street, scanning the streets for signs of Christy. As his car drives past, Christy turns a corner. He does not see her. Christy hurries along the streets. The wind is chilly. Sometimes she hears a bell in it. Steve drives up to the house. The lights are still burning. He gets out of the car and hurries down the path. He knocks on the door. There's no reply. Two shadowy, naked figures stand face to face in the bedroom. We can see no detail of their features. We move down their bodies. They are standing in a shining pool of blood. Steve starts round the back of the house. The male of the couple pats toward the bedroom door, leaving a trail of blood behind him. We can still see very little of the man. Christy turns the corner of the street and starts down it. The wind is strong now. It is full of sibilant whispers, hurrying her along. Julia dresses. Christy reaches the doorstep. As she does so, the whispers die away completely. She beats on the door. No reply. She beats again more urgently. Please, Dad, it's me. It's Christy. Julia steps onto the landing. We can hear Christy shouting on the step. Darn her. We hear a voice off screen. It is Frank or Larry. Impossible to be sure. Answer it. Christy still beats on the door. Please answer me, please. The door is suddenly opened. Julia is standing there. Christy, it's very late. Where's Daddy? What's the problem? I have to see my father. Of course, there's no need to shout. We pan across the table. At the end of the table sits Larry. The light is behind him. His features are shadowy, but we can see that he is badly bruised. We hear the woman's voice off screen. You look terrible. Have you had an accident? I was here this afternoon. This afternoon? I saw everything. I'm sorry, I don't follow. What was there to see? Christy didn't answer, but walks through into the dining room. Christy sees Larry at the table. Oh gosh, thank goodness. She starts to sob. I thought something might have. She glances around at Julia, who has also entered. I have to talk to you. Of course. Larry leans forward and into the pool of light over the table. He looks much the worse for wear. His flesh is raw and bruised. There's blood at his neck and hairline. It's all right, sweetheart. Julia's told me everything. And it's all right. No, you don't understand. Your brother Frank, he's here in the house and he's... Whatever Frank did was his era. And is finished with now. Finished? He's gone. Gone? Dead. He was insane, baby. A mad dog. I put him out of his misery. Christy stares at Larry, while in her head she hears the Cenobite's voice. We'll tear your soul apart. I'll go to the police when I'm feeling stronger. Try and find some way to make them understand, though goodness knows I don't really understand myself. Did he hurt you? Christy is dumb with horror at her situation. Poor Frank. He's better off dead. I don't believe it. I'm afraid it's true. Tears in her eyes. I want to see. No, you don't. Yes. Show her. Christy turns away from Larry. Julia leads her out into the hallway. It cuts to Larry still sitting at the table. His fingers drum a familiar tattoo. Beneath his breath, he hums Colin No Bogey. Julia pushes open the door of the torture room. It creaks wide. Lying on the floor in the middle of the room is a skinned corpse. In a tangle of torn clothing, it seems there's blood everywhere. That too steams. Christy is revolted. She steps away from the door, back down the landing. The bell has begun to ring again, distantly. And there is the sound of the wings in the air. Thousands of birds beating on the other side of the wall. Christy starts down the stairs again. Where are you going? Christy doesn't reply. She merely hurries away. Calling after her, you leave this to us. You hear me? We'll deal with the police. Christy descends the stairs. Larry has stepped out of the dining room and is moving to intercept her as she makes her way to the front door. The sound of wings and bells and a terrible slow thunder which unpins it all mounts in volume. Larry snatches at her arm. Where are you going? I have to go. I have to get out. She shrugs off his arm. The thunder is increasing. Stay with me. Julia is on the stairs watching this exchange. It's all right. Really it is. He touches her face fondly. I can't stay. She goes to the door. Come to Daddy. She hesitates at the door and turns. The thunder fills Christy's head as she stares at Larry, who opens his arms to her. Come to Daddy. Her gaze moves up to Julia, who is at the stairs. No. Darn you. Oh my gosh! Everything is slowing down. The bells and the thunder fill the soundtrack. Larry smiles as Christy moves towards him. Tears have begun to fill her eyes. She searches for him. His smile decays as he realizes her objective. Her nails rake his cheek. The flesh puckers and tears along the brow. Blood flows. The mask of stolen flesh he wears slips a little, and Frank's twisted features come into view. Frank! Christy screams as Frank lunges for her. The lights in the hallway flicker and threaten to go out. Christy avoids Frank's blow, but in doing so allows him to get the bit between her and the front door. She's trapped. His torn face flapping, he opens his jacket, the interior of which is blood-stained, and pulls a knife from the lining. Suddenly, Julia's behind her, gripping hold of her hair. Frank advances on Christy, but in the last moment before the fatal stab, Christy twists, avoiding the blow. Julia shrieks and stumbles forward, the knife gleaming as it's buried to the hilt in her side. Christy slips from between them. Julia collapses into Frank's arms. He holds her up. Christy makes a dive for the front door, but Frank lets Julia slip and intercepts Christy. Julia falls back against the wall, dying. Christy retreats to the bottom of the stairs. Frank follows. You're not leaving now. As he follows, Julia reaches out and takes hold of his sleeve. Christy flees the only route she can upstairs. The house is creaking at every board and rafter now. Frank turns on Julia, trapping her against the wall. Help me, Frank, for goodness sake. He puts his hands around her neck and leans towards her. At the last moment, she seems to understand that he intends not to kiss her, but to steal what little life she has left. No, Frank. From the stairs, Christy glimpses him battering upon her. Then she looks away and runs up the stairs. When we look back, Julia is withered in Frank's arms. The landing is smoky. The light has taken on a yellowish tinge. The air is full of moans. Christy is desperate for a hiding place. She tries one of the doors, but it's locked. She opens another, and the din of birds' wings gets louder. A point-of-view shot, lunging towards Christy in the doorway. She slams the door in the face of whatever's coming for her. Frank hears the door slam. He drops Julia to the ground. She's dead, her flesh rotting on her face. Frank starts to climb the stairs, his eyes burning with hunger. Christy is cornered from below Frank's voice. "Where are you, beautiful?" Christy starts up the second flight of stairs as Frank's shadow is thrown up on the walls below. Christy is faced with a choice. The torture room door is open, but the skinned body isn't there, so instead she heads for the junk room and opens the door. Moonlight falls through the window, illuminating a chaos of furniture and boxes. She crosses to the window and tries to get it open. It won't budge. "Where are you, honey?" She looks around for a lever to open the window with. Frank reaches the lantern and opens the bedroom door, calling for her. Then he starts up the last flight of stairs. "Come to Daddy." Christy lifts a cloth off one of the boxes. Staring up from the box is the corpse of Prudhoe. His eyes and mouth open a silent shriek. She reels back from the box, terrified, back into the shadows. An arm reaches for her, taking hold of her and dragging her down into the darkness as the door opens. Frank stands on the threshold. His breath is thick. He shambles forward, but he doesn't see her. We cut back to the shadows. Christy's eyes are wild with terror. Back to the door, which clicks closed. Christy breaks cover, and she does, and so does her savior. It's Steve. He is sweating with terror. "What are you doing here?" "Got in downstairs, looking for you. What's going on?" She shakes her head. Steve brings the box from his jacket. "You forgot something." She doesn't see what he's producing. She's already moving to the door. She listens. The lantern is empty. The door of the junk room opens. Christy steps out. The house is strangely still. The lights swing a little, but otherwise nothing. She advances along the passageway. Steve follows. They reach the top of the stairs in safety. Signaled more than spoken. "I'll go first." As she speaks, Frank steps out of the torture room, knife in hand. Roaring, he comes at them both. Christy flings herself out of the path of the knife. Frank swipes at Steve, who falls backward down the stairs. He cries out, head hitting the stairs as he descends. The box falls from his unconscious hand. Frank turns on Christy. Who avoids one slice of the knife and another, but is driven back into the torture room. He's after her in a flash. She falls beside her father's body, her eyes meeting the skinned face. "Gosh!" "Don't cry for him. He's dead. He always was." Christy has been pushed to the limits of her endurance. She can be terrorized and pursued no longer. Death looks an easy option by comparison with more of Frank's horrors. "Go on. Kill me. I don't care." "Oh, poor baby. You bastard." "Hush now. It's all right. Frank's here." "Frank." "That's right. Are you losing your mind, baby? This is Frank you're talking to. Frank." As he speaks, the bell begins tolling again. Frank looks puzzled. "What's going on?" Light begins to pour through the walls of the room. "No." He starts toward the door, but he's too late. The Cenobites are standing in his way. He backs off from them. "Frank." "What took you so long?" "We had to hear it from his own lips." Frank turns on Christy. "You set me up. You set me up." The pattern of light in the room has become more elaborate, and the Cenobites move through it towards Frank. "This isn't for your eyes." Christy crosses toward the door. As she reaches for the handle, she hears Frank roar behind her. She turns. He breaks between the Cenobites, knife in hand, but as he comes within striking distance, the air is full of whining sounds, and he stops dead. They have their hooks in him, we see. In his arms and legs, in his back and sides, in his scalp and neck and temples, hooks attached to countless chains which arrest his progress. They plow through his flesh as he strives to reach her, but at a gesture from the leader of the Cenobites, the chains are hauled in. He flings back his head, yelling, "Ah!" The knife dropped from his hand. Out. She turns back to the door and opens it. Frank is hauled back towards the center of the room. "You be!" The house is growling from basement to eaves now as Christy steps onto the landing. Behind her, Frank howls. She looks back. They have him in his body spread eagled, hooks in 100 places pulling at his flesh. He fights like a wild animal, snarling and cursing. They pull the chains tighter. A close-up of Frank's face. He suddenly stops fighting. He raises his head, his eyes staring up at Christy from beneath a bleeding, sweating brow. He flicks his tongue over his bloody lips. Then he comes apart. The door slams as Frank's body is torn apart in a welter of blood and flesh fragments. Something heavy thuds against the door. Christy turns and starts down the stairs. As she reaches the place where Steve is half sitting, half lying, the house starts to growl as though its foundations are about to give way. Steve's nose is bleeding and his face is bruised, but he's conscious. "We have to get out of here. They'll kill us for the fun of it." Steve staggers to his feet. Christy picks up the box, which is on the lower landing. As she picks it up, the female Cenobite steps from the shadows. "Don't leave us yet." Christy starts to try and manipulate the box in her hands. "We have such sights to show you." Christy manages to slot one of the pieces of the box back into place. "Don't." Her voice becomes a howl and she's sucked away into darkness. "Goodness!" Steve cries. They start down to the half landing. There stands the Cenobite in the dark glasses carrying the hooked rod he threatens Steve with in the hospital. Again, Christy manipulates the box. Again, the Cenobite howls and is claimed by the darkness. They hurry down the hallway, half expecting another creature to step into their path. Dust is falling from the ceiling, and there are cracks opening up in the walls. Any moment, surely the whole place will be destroyed. Julia's body has gone from the hallway. A trail of blood leads into the dining room. As Christy and Steve stumble across the hallway, they hear Julia's voice off screen, an eerie, ghostly voice. "Christy?" Christy hesitates and looks toward the door of the dining room. There stands the bride, her white dress soaked in blood, her veil covering her face. "Julia?" Christy takes a step towards her, but as she does so, the veil rises of its own accord and the chattering Cenobite is beneath. Christy slams the box closed. The Cenobite howls and disappears. Steve heads for the door, turns the handle. As he does so, Christy realizes there's one piece of the box unfinished. "Don't!" Too late, he turns the handle, the door is flung open and the engineer, clinging to the sides of the door, swings down into the hallway. Steve is flung backwards against Christy. The box falls from Christy's hand. The beast moves to bite at Steve, who scrambles out of the way, leaving Christy in the front line. The box lies between Christy and the engineer, which now uses his forelegs to crawl over the hallway towards her, its legs still bracing it on the door. She snatches for the box. The engineer, its mouth oozing fluids, almost catches her arm. Again she tries. This time one of its arms seizes hold of Christy and drags her towards its jaw. Behind Christy, Steve snatches up a piece of plaster and flings it in the engineer's face. It momentarily relaxes its grip on Christy, who slides her hand from his hold and claims the box. She now has slime on her fingers. The box defies her manipulation. "Come on, come on!" The engineer crawls towards them. Up above, the den of the roof collapsing, timbers and dust hurtling down the stairs. "Crap, crap, crap!" The engineer is almost upon her. It rears up, its saliva dropping on her, and then miraculously, the last piece of the box slots into place. The same vortex that seized the other Cenobite seizes the engineer, howling its complaint. It is drawn out into the darkness beyond the door and disappears. Its voice grows thin and fades. Finally, silence. The house is still. Christy gets to her feet. Steve does the same. Together they move to the door and out onto the steps. The door slams behind them and of its own accord. Christy turns the sealed box over in her hand. There is a slit in it which has not quite closed. Light suddenly pours from it up into Christy's face. Her features are momentarily distorted, as if sucked towards the box. From within, shrieks, bells, music. Between the screams, Frank's voice, "Come to Daddy." She slams the panel shut. The distortion ceases. So does the din. Christy says quietly, "Not tonight." A smile crosses her face, and she leaves the doorstep, making her way towards the street. Steve gazes at her, then follows. Their figures are erased by the darkness. Somewhere a bell rings as the credits roll. I hope our dear friends found what they were looking for, and I hope y'all also enjoyed the story. Please do like, comment, subscribe to stay part of the House Without an Echo. Okay, guys. Bye.